Welcome to the Amplifying Leadership podcast. I am your host, Tara Lehman, a partner, coach, and consultant at Twin Life Coaching and Business Services, of which Amplifying Leadership is a division. This podcast is a place dedicated to amplifying your leadership through our guest stories, tips, information, and more. To learn more about our leadership division, please visit us at amplifyingleadership.ca. Today, I am welcoming Danielle Riddle, a CEO and also a co-founder. Welcome to Amplifying Leadership.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Lovely to meet you.
And you. So why don't you give us a little bit of your story around leadership?
Sure. So I started my career in Australia. I was quite young. I worked in the industry right from a young age. And one of my first sort of forays into the industry was in tour bus companies, which is a very interesting part of our industry because it was extremely male-dominated part of our industry.
Yes, yes.
I learned very quickly what it was like to work in an environment where there was heavy male leadership. And because I was so ambitious, I wanted to lead myself. And I had always displayed those characteristics as a kid. And I knew that I had the potential, but, it was about having to stand up and go for it. So quite young, I made that decision to move into the travel agency side of things and work for a big box company where I quickly sort of rose there and took over a store. And I knew if I could run a store in a big box, it would give me all of that back office experience that I needed to know to eventually start my own company.
Mm-hmm.
And then moving into the corporate arm of things, again, not only is it who you're working with, but also your customers that you're working with, that you really have to understand people really well and executives and how to manage executives accurately. So that became a big part of my focus. And then once I had the opportunity and chance, I decided that risk reward has to come into it and you have to jump and you have to give it a go. And so in 2009, I founded Inspired. And since then, we've grown year upon year and we've focused on our niche and our point of difference and rehumanizing the travel industry, which was always what was my goal. And I think I had such a strength in being able to do that, being a female leader, leading with so much empathy that, it gave us such a huge advantage. And I think I used that confidence to make that our focus, and it's continued to see us sort of rise and become the cream of our industry, which is amazing. So yeah, it's been a great journey, a long one, but a great one.
Well, congratulations on all of that. I mean, we have to have the journey in order to get to where we are today, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the experience that helps us to understand how to make better decisions. And I think learning from the hiccups and the pitfalls, and stepping back up and just going harder every time.
So I want to talk a little bit about a topic you enjoy talking about, and one that resonates deeply with me, which is about those female leaders in those traditional male-dominated spaces. So for those who maybe are new to listening, I do come from trucking and transportation, which is a heavily male-dominated industry. So your topic is very, very exciting to me.
Yeah.
Why don't you start by just telling us why you feel that there maybe is less female leaders in more traditionally male-dominated spaces? Why are we not more numerous at the top?
I think, look, this comes from a pretty deep-rooted bias, let's be honest. It's often people think of leadership, or they did previously, as being equated with masculine traits. And it's very difficult when you come in as a woman, because you are automatically assumed to be the assistant or the backup or, the gopher, so to speak. And I felt that right from the get-go. But I kind of saw it more as a challenge rather than as something that would become adversity to me. I was like, okay, I'm going to show that it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your minority, you can do it regardless. And I think we are often judged as being either, because we're so empathetic, we're too soft, or because if we try to be firm but fair, we're too aggressive. And so, there's these sort of like, we're put into two piles and it becomes very difficult. Whereas men don't get those tags. And so if they're aggressive, they're just a great firm leader. I think it's discouraging to women because they're afraid that if they display too much of their empathetic skills, they'll be seen as soft. And like I said, they'll get the tag of being, a nasty leader, which we don't want either. But we have to break through that, right? We have to ignore those old school ideas and really just act like they don't exist.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, judged is a word that you've said a couple of times that resonates. I mean, I used to go to conferences and sometimes I would introduce myself and what I did as a leader, and whomever it was I was being maybe introduced to would almost have that shocked look on their face, but oh, really nice to meet you, as if, why are you doing that? Or wow, there's a woman here. It was a little bit different than, when you're just working in your workplace. At my workplace, very inclusive. And so
Yeah.
you didn't notice it. And then you go to these conferences and you're just, and it's an unconscious bias, I think, with being judged. Would you say that that happens quite often?
Absolutely, because I think that as women, we think that it's a conscious decision on men's part. However, I think that it is unconscious. And if you can push yourself to not fall victim to it and think that it is a conscious decision, you will then find that if you are strong and you're confident through it, they'll respect you very quickly. So it's when you're faced with that and it does scare you and you shy away, that they're almost like, oh, well, I was right. She's not in control, right? But
Right.
if you walk in and you get that reaction, but you can force yourself to push through that and just smile and nod above it and hold your head high, it doesn't take long for that respect to be granted to you. And that's not to say that we have to work harder for respect, but I think because of those unconscious biases, we all do that in many different facets in our life. And I think that it's hard to change it. We're seeing the pendulum swing, but it's still there. And I have similar many experiences to you, going into client meetings, into executive meetings, and walking in. And I've walked in with a sales manager with me, and they don't even direct the conversation at me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sudden, I just ignore it. I go on with where I'm about to go with things. And all of a sudden, everyone gets a little bit of like shift in their seat. But before too long, they realize, wow, this is a boss lady, right? And that's what you have to do. So you have to hold your head high, and you really have to try and yourself not think of those, you know, unconscious, subconscious biases.
I have a question around that, especially for people who are a little bit more introverted, or they're really feeling this bias and they don't know how to be that confident person to keep your head high when you're meeting someone or in meetings, etc. What strategies could you say could help them with building that confidence so that when they do go in, they're seen, they're heard, and they're trying their best to keep their head high, which could be difficult for some?
Look, I totally can relate, because as much as I'm confident in some ways with some things, other things throw me off exactly the same, and I get nervous, and I fear that I'm not going to be able to stand up and do it. But I think this is where, from a leadership perspective, the leaders within the organizations that have these team members that are stepping up, or people they see with potential, it's up to us to actually really nurture that, see their potential, and help mentor them into becoming a leader. Teach them the skills they need to hold their head high. Make sure that we're aware of their strengths and their weaknesses, and really focusing on their strengths and giving them the encouragement that they need to, at the end of the day, it's like being able to walk in and say, I'm going to go for it regardless. It's all very psychological. So I think working on it
Mhm.
from a deep emotional level. And this is where, again, on the flip side, female leaders are so good at that. That is our strength. We can sit and mentor someone, really understand who they are from an emotional perspective. And if we focus on that with our staff, we can help them grow into these leadership roles and really just not even have to have that fear, because we're taking it away for them, and
Mhm.
sort of push them out of their comfort zone without them even knowing it. Like, it's very hard sometimes to take the leap, and people have, fear of public speaking, or they have a fear of anything like talking to people. But at the end of the day, we have to help them learn how to take that jump, right? So,
Mhm.
and I think being around other powerful women is so inspiring. And I know that's what helped me when I was working in a very male dominated side of this industry. And my marketing leader, I remember her so well. She was so intelligent. She was so steadfast, and she was so aware of her strengths. And because of that, it made her confident. And it taught me that I have to continue to believe in myself. And as long as
Mm.
I know what I'm good at and I know the truth of that, I can go in with my head held high. And that's what we have to keep teaching in our staff.
And it certainly is a mindset, right? You have to believe in your abilities. And I love that you mentioned the strengths and weaknesses, but that the strengths are a focus. And I say the same thing.
Yeah,
Focus on the strengths and build them, because you can fill the gap of a weakness later, but focus
absolutely.
on what you're awesome at and prove them to them that you've got it.
Yeah.
Do you feel that when we have to prove ourselves to people, that women have to try harder in these traditionally male dominated areas and spaces to really get people to see it?
I do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it hasn't gone away. It's
Mm.
yeah, you really do. You have to show that you're not afraid. You can never show weakness. And at the end of the day, if weakness is seen, um, you will just get trampled on. And so sometimes you have to have this tough exterior, even if you need to take the time to like focus on other things in your wellness outside of work. You really have to
Mhm.
put your confidence cap on, I would say, every time you walk into the office or pick up the phone, and exert that like level of um ability, but not cockiness. Like, we don't want it to come across as, seeming like we're know-it-alls at everything. Because like I said,
Perfection. Yeah.
you then get the other side of things where people say, oh, she's too pushy, she doesn't know what she's doing, she's just bossy, because we also get the bossy title, which is ironic, but they don't want us to be the boss. So there's a lot of contradictions in
Yeah.
the way that women are looked at in the workforce. But I'm seeing more and more of my colleagues, my friends as well, just rise in the corporate world, and it's so accomplishing. And those that are rising are the ones, like I said, that really are focusing on what they know they're good at, and no one's going to tell them otherwise. And I think once you get that in your head, um, the sky's the limit. I try to look at it like, I don't care whether you're man, woman, tall, short, where you're from, I don't care. I'm going to be exactly the same, and I'm going to try and crush anything, right? So, yeah,
Yeah.
you need to
That
build up the confidence.
that's a great way of putting it too, is it doesn't matter who's sitting in front of you. Just picture them as everybody else. Like they're just that person. It doesn't matter if they're a man or somebody else. And just be you. Show
Yeah.
your strengths.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
know, it's and you're right, it's awful. We have to prove ourselves 10 times more than any man does in some of these industries. Not all companies, we're not blanketing across all companies, but in general.
Yeah.
But I want to come back to something you noted, which was when we show weakness
Mhm.
and how exasperated it can be, because people just make it into this great big thing, if they want to try to prove that you're not capable.
Mhm.
How can we overcome that? Like, are there strategies that, I made this mistake, they see it,
Mhm.
maybe now they're just trying to say, oh, well, she can't do this role because of something that I did. How do we overcome that? How do we push through that?
Honestly, I think that it's about coming back to the basics of anything. Everybody makes mistakes. We need to make the mistakes to grow. If
100%.
you don't ever fall, then you never get the chance to get back up and show what you're capable of. And I think, like, as a woman and as a leader and mentoring other young women coming into the corporate world, you want to hiccup, you want to have a few falls, you want to put yourself in a position where you're going to be challenged, because it's the challenge and the grit that comes from it that makes you the leader that you become. And so I think it's not about having a mistake or how someone's going to judge you for your mistake. Because I believe that people will only judge you for how you recover or whether you try to recover. So it's like you've got to tell yourself, I'm going to give this a shot. You know what? It may not work, but if it doesn't work, I'm going to pivot. And that applies to any leader, not just a
Hmm.
female leader. And if someone looks at you as being, oh, well, it's because, it should have been done by a man, they would have done it right the first time. You've got to brush that off as if you were a man and you fell or you had the mistake, there would have been some judgment of him too. So they're just going to find the easiest way to get at you. And I think it's such an easy out. Like that's how I've always kind of looked at it now. It's like to walk into a room full of men, into a boardroom, and sit down to a group of executives and present a corporate travel policy or a plan. You sort of walk in and there's this air of like, oh, what's this going to be?
Hmm.
Now I look at that and say, oh, this is going to be so fun because they have no idea, right? So you need to get yourself into that position where I'm not afraid to go up against anybody in what I know that I can excel in. And I think that's, again, it's all about the way we are training and teaching these leaders, that we want to teach our leaders, male or female, the same way, but we want to teach the women to say, okay, some of your biggest strengths men don't possess just by nature. So let's turn that into the pendulum swinging to become our force to be reckoned with. And so let's make empathy and the emotional perspective of it the part that makes us shine. And we might see them flounder a little bit, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's very rewarding when you know that you are seeing your staff and they're flourishing as a result of that empathetic management skill that is new, and it is new management.
Mhm.
So, and that's courtesy of female leaders, I believe. So, we've
Yeah.
got a lot to be proud of too, and I think we need to keep reminding ourselves of that.
And there's certainly a balance when you have a great diverse leadership team, whether that be male, female, whatever else that might be. There's so much more value there because you're not just seeing one vision, or it's not all empathy, or it's not all whatever the man brings, or it's not all whatever another diversity brings, right? It's about having diversity in the leadership
Yes, and I
at the
think
table.
I would say that's a really good point because, in our leadership style, we're an equal male and female leadership in how we're running the business, and we have our strengths are extraordinarily specific and segregated, but collaboratively they work so well together. And
Yeah.
so it's about men and women coming together and saying and acknowledging each other's strengths and then saying, right, we need to capitalize on these strengths and make sure that, if I see that in you and I know that's what you're going to be able to do, you need to roll with that. I need to roll with this, and we can collaboratively come back together and have that synergy. But it's when people try to step on the other's toes to prove themselves that they could end up having a problem. And I think
Mhm.
that's a communication, really important in the communication of the business, is that knowing who your leaders are and why they are that leader, whether they're a man or a woman, but making sure that those inherent skills that we have as men and women, let's really try and capitalize on those. And once you do that within an organization, it's very harmonious because there's respect on both sides. And I know what I'm not good at, so I'm going to delegate that. And that's what I always say to my staff too. Know your strengths first. And then, like you said, weaknesses we can work on if we need to, but we may be able
Yep.
to delegate that to someone who is better attuned to doing that than you are. And that's okay. We can't be good at everything, right?
Love that you said that, because I always say perfection doesn't exist and leaders don't need to know everything. We
No.
just don't. It's about who's at that leadership table. And like you said, bringing all of those strengths together makes a business just thrive
Yes.
if you have enough diversity at the top, because those ideas, those different aspects and personalities and everything, and our strengths really will drive an organization forward.
Well, and I think women as leaders, we are, I believe, and I may be wrong about this and people may disagree, but generally we don't lead with our ego as much. And that's not to say all men do, but because of that, we are more open to other people taking on leadership tasks because that's what we do. We're like a village, right? We are collaborative. So we look at things and say, oh, she's amazing at this, he's amazing at that. That is my leadership skill, is to say, let's put that person in there, let's slot them in. And I want to come to you and say, you know what? This is my weakness. I need you to help me make this part of our business shine. And that is so empowering for people. And I think that's where women, we always check our ego at the door. It's not about that for us. And that makes us so powerful in its own sense, and very inspiring for your team, very inspiring for employees. I've always looked up to any female leader I had for that reason, because I always felt supported and that they were going to help me grow. And, and again, leadership is, there's not one kind of leadership. There's so many facets. And I think, it's about, like you said, looking at many different diversities in how we can all come together rather than just being one iron fist. It's just not like that anymore, which is
Yeah. And there are places where egos are still there. And that is something that we need to try to get rid of, because collaboration is the way forward, like we've been talking about, right? And having that diverse leadership table.
Oh,
I want
yes.
to I want to shift a question to you, because I'm wondering, when we have, let's say we are in an organization that is very male ego driven, how do we get male leaders on board with us to help us grow and help the organization start to shift? And I don't mean, if it's a large organization, shifting won't happen fast, but what can we do to get someone on, like a male leader, on board with us?
I think, look, this all comes down to like validating the experience of women and listening to what your staff need. So male leaders need to come into it as well and say, I need to first look at, even if you're looking at a resume or you're looking at considering someone, don't look at their name or where they're from or anything like that.
Agree.
Read their experience, see what they have done, what they've established for themselves. Try to take gender out of it completely and look at it as non-biased as possible. It shouldn't matter where they're from, what race they are, what background they are. None of it matters. At the end of the day, you need the person who's best for the job. And if that happens to be an amazing female leader, then you've found the right person by not thinking about, first of all, do we need another man or a woman in this environment? Oh, it's a group of guys. Let's get another guy to play golf with us, kind of thing, right? No. Men have to stop thinking like that and have to start thinking about who's going to do this job the best. Let's look at these resumes from a non-biased perspective and interview, not even knowing whether I'm going to talk to a man or a woman. And I think even straight from that perspective, you're going to see a shift. And it needs to come from an organization and policy perspective. We need to, share the spotlight of people. We need to, in our business, give women more public credit. We need to give women the spotlight as much as we're giving it to the men. People just assume the chairman is going to be a man. They assume the CEO is going to be a man. At the end of the day, the visionary should be the CEO of the company, and that's all there is to it. And I think it shouldn't matter whether it's man, woman, or what. So yeah, again, all of this comes back to how you are structuring the business. If the business is being structured by a man with that focus, it's going to be very hard to shift it. But I think if you've got an executive team that can collaboratively come together, it is about really focusing on giving women that spotlight and giving them the chance to fall. Like I said, let them give it a shot. If they fall, they got to pick themselves up just like anybody else would. And I think, yeah, it's trusting the process and being more open-minded at the end of the day in many ways is what we have to do.
And I want to come back to the recruiting side of things with you briefly, because you had talked about the resumes and trying to look at them with an unbiased eye. And I've actually, suggested to somebody at one of my clients was, have someone collect all the resumes and actually remove pictures or names or whatever, or photocopy them without that, and give you just the resume. So there is literally no bias, because even if you get the resumes with the name on it and you're trying to ignore them, you're still going to see it. Your brain goes there, right?
Absolutely.
So I suggested doing a blind resume and then picking your top 5 from the blind resume You have no idea where they live. You have no idea who they are, what their name is. No, no pictures, nothing, just a blind resume.
Mhm.
And they found so much change in their hiring.
Oh my gosh, like you don't even realize that you're making biased decisions, like you said, even
Mhm.
just by a glance at a name or a presumption from a name or anything, or where they live or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think that is the best way to start right from the grassroots. When you're looking at employing someone, it's the first place you go is you collect the resumes, like you say. So being
Mhm.
able to look at someone's experience without any bias is so powerful because you never know what you're going to find as well. You never know what
Yeah.
you're overlooking, I think, is probably the point.
Hmm.
I think people would be surprised sometimes if they had, like you said, blind interviews set up. They'd be
Hmm.
shocked at who they'd be talking to. And that
I
could be
think so.
a very enlightening moment for a lot of leaders and a lot of recruiters too.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a lot that has to go into the recruiting aspect and using language in your ads that isn't biased. And, if someone has to, I remember we were hiring for warehouse and you have to lift up to 50 pounds. And, I interviewed a wonderful young lady and we were about to hire and take to the manager, take to the supervisor. What do you think? Well, can she lift 50 pounds? I'm like, she says she can. We don't do any kind of test with anybody else just because she's a female. And we hired her, and boy, that woman, she could lift up to 75 pounds. And she was this tiny little thing that you would never believe. So
Yeah.
bias has to be thrown out the window. I mean, and it's so important to bring the unconscious conscious, which is what we're trying to do today a bit here too, right? Bring the unconscious conscious. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, look, I think it's amazing because when I think of the industry that I've been in and just the way that back in the 90s and early 2000s, like we have come a long way. However, it's not that long ago either. And to think that industry companies I worked for in the 2000s, where I would just work so hard to prove myself, and yet
Yeah.
still get promoted around me just because they were sort of, there was this boys club mentality, which is just so toxic. And it does
Mhm.
still exist in a lot of industries. And it can be so disheartening when you work so hard. But if you can rise above that and keep pushing on, I am confident that even though it can be hard in the moment and in the beginning, you end up so much further ahead. I can look back on it now and say, I'm kind of grateful that they were like that because
Mhm.
I pushed even harder and I it gave me so much more tenacity. It developed so much grit in me and determination. And I think that if you can look at it as something to be grateful for, you can
Mhm.
then move forward with it. And you can rise above that sort of that deep set of emotional fear that women get of like, will I ever get there? Am I going to get overturned for this promotion? But don't let yourself be overturned by the promotion, because the moment we do drop our shoulders, drop our head, walk in behind a man, don't do it.
Mhm.
You've got to say, no, I'm walking in the room. I'm going to shake hands with that person first because it's really important to me. Don't defer to a man. And I think like I would have done that when I was younger for sure. I certainly don't do it now, but it takes years of experience and wisdom, I guess, to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many of these things we do just because we've been or we think a certain way, but it's not really the reality as well. Because I think it's hard on the flip side that a lot of men say, well, hang on, I try to be as inclusive as possible. I don't judge anybody. And they're a victim of circumstance, unfortunately, but they
Mhm.
also cannot relate. And I've had this discussion with leaders in our own business because we talk about these things openly too, which is another important thing. You have to have
Yes.
discussion, even if you're in an inclusive environment, because honestly, even if they're doing everything right, they still need to understand that they cannot empathize because they've never felt it. And it's such a like, I'm sorry, I don't care what any man says, they've never felt it the way a woman feels trying to rise up the ranks. And so it's really good to talk about it because even though sometimes don't want to hear it and say, well, I'm doing the right thing, so that's all I can do. But sometimes they need to also think, but I've never felt that. So sometimes our reactions to things might be harsher or over the top or more dramatic, but there's reason behind it. So it's about understanding that about women who are leaders in this particular generation as well.
Absolutely.
We were there when it wasn't. We were there in, through the whole like Me Too thing, everything. I mean,
Mhm.
gosh, you worked in an environment where I'm sure you can relate. Um, it's just a trucker environment also, like, that kind of mentality. And oh my gosh, it's not easy. And yeah,
Yeah.
but again,
Yeah,
the advantage for us have been on both sides of the coin. So, you know,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the industry is very slow to change, as are many.
Oh,
Um, so I think that was a great summary of our conversation today. I'm wondering if you have that, takeaway for our females who are still feeling a little bit nervous about showing that confidence when they don't really feel it. How do they walk in that room and be the first to shake a hand when they haven't grown up, so to speak, that way? You know what I mean?
yeah, I think that continuing to work on yourself always, outside of the boardroom, knowing that you need to build up your own confidence. You need to believe in
Mhm.
yourself no matter what. You need to know what you're good at, and you need to celebrate your victories as well. Don't
Yeah.
shy away from celebrating your victories, and know that leadership is not a one size fits all. That's really what I would say. It's really, really important that if we don't have every piece of clothing for the outfit is not complete. So, there's going to be different ideals, different values, different concepts. And if you can bring them all together, and again, if we bring that diversity to the table at the beginning, if the company itself says we need a diverse leadership, not just an iron fist, then that's the first
Mhm.
step towards like empowering people that have hidden talents too. So, as women, I believe that we bring so much empathy and adaptability, a lot of problem solving skills to the table. And these are the qualities that all industries need. And we have to remember that it's unique to us as women. And so,
Mhm.
those people that are sitting back thinking, oh my gosh, I'm too scared, or I don't want to take the leap, or I don't know if it'll be embraced, just remember that you have a unique set of skills that will make you absolutely rise if you embrace them.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely love that. What a great way to summarize and end our show.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. If our audience did want to learn more about what you do or find you online, is there a way they can do that?
Yeah, so they can visit our website at inspiredtravelgroup.ca. They can also find us on LinkedIn and yeah, Facebook. All of the socials are there. We'd love to connect with any businesses that want to streamline their corporate processes and also rehumanize what's happening in the travel industry. It's the time when we really, really need it, and we're seeing that's why our business has grown so well, is because we're bringing people back into a faceless industry, and it's a game changer. So yes, it,
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for
you.
such a great conversation today.
That was
Appreciate
lovely,
it.
Tara.
We also would love, of course, to thank you, our audience. We hope you gained some valuable insights or tips from today's conversation with Danielle. If you did enjoy this episode, be sure to leave us a great rating. This helps us and our guests like Danielle reach even more leaders with this important information, helpful stories, tips, and advice. We love helping other leaders grow and thrive, and we would love for you to consider our brand new Amplifying Leadership Circle community. More information can be found at amplifyingleadership.ca/community-info. Leadership is better when we do it together. For more information about all of our leadership services, please visit us anytime at amplifyingleadership.ca, a division of Twin Life Coaching and Business Services. Until next time, remember, leadership matters.